Distinguished judges, thank you very much for watching this video. We are the Insper Consulting Group, and we will talk about our analysis on the wealth distribution case. First of all, we would like to introduce our team to you. So I am Larissa Antunes, the Commercial Director of our Insper Consulting Group. We also have Gabriela Brandao, our Strategy and Operations Director. We also have Joao Raupp as our Finance Director, and finishing the team, we also have Lais Caldeira, our Marketing Director. So the agenda today is to talk about the key identified issues, followed by a scenario analysis, where we present alternatives and recommendation to deal with the topic, and we end with our conclusion. So I will first tell a little bit about the key identified issues. The first one is the social and economic inequality, which is growing in the world. And this has been very much evidenced by the COVID-19 crisis in the last 2 years in the world, and how the rich and poor countries have dealt differently with the vaccination issue, for example. Which leads us to the third main identified issue, which was the wealth concentration cycle and how it is very hard to be broken due to different reasons. For example, how the tax are charged unproportionally, or how there is lack of tools from the mass to change or to break the cycle. And also which leads us to the fourth point, which is the difficulty to really find accountable and able people to change the situation. Now my colleague Joao is going to talk to you through the scenario analysis of the situation.
Thank you, Larissa. In order to better understand the current situation of wealth disparity, our group looked for some important numbers to better address the recommendations. And what we found can be quite alarming. The first example is the wealth evolution over 2018. During that year, global billionaires saw their wealth increase $3.9 trillion, while for regular works, the wealth shrinked by $3.7 trillion, increasing the gap between the richest people over everyone else. Another interest figure of comparison is the relative wealth between billionaires and the poorest people in the world. In 2009, it was necessary 380 billionaires to equal the amount of wealth of the 50% poorest people on Earth. Alarming. But over the next years, the disparity is increasing. By 2018, it was only necessary 26 billionaires to top the same amount of wealth of the 50% poorest. This is 14 times less billionaires necessary to reach the amount of wealth of half of the entire world. Another good example that we came across is the Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report that indicates that while the top 1% of the richest people amounts for 43% of the world's wealth, the bottom 50% of world's population only concentrate 1% of the global wealth. Another good and updated example is the vaccination against coronavirus over the world. When we look by doses administered per 100 people, high-income countries has 18 times higher rates over the low-income ones. It shows clearly how wealth disparity triggers greater risk for the less privileged ones. Now, my colleague Larissa will share some extra thoughts.
So this analysis leads to this cycle that we have mentioned in the beginning. So we do have an increasing number of unsatisfied individuals who cannot leave the poverty and the misery situation. And this leads to the elite status quo to be threatened by this mass who is not happy or satisfied with their life quality. And this is a very favorable scenario for the populist and extreme politicians who gain space and an opportunity to gain elections around the world. And we do have the increasing number of cases of xenophobia and racial segregation, also leading again to an increasing number of social and economic disparity. In the middle of all this, we do have the social medias and the fake news catalyzing this cycle. And this is the cycle which is really hard to be broken. And we have elaborated a privilege walk. So starting, imagining if we have a start point and a finish line, and this is a race, and we have the countries or the population of the countries trying to reach the finish line. So starting everybody equally, and how the inequalities in the world have made the situation really hard for poor and developing countries to reach the finish line. So if we start making questions like total fertility rate in countries like Congo and Norway to be compared, we have a 4.4 number in Congo and 1.5 in Norway. Life expectancy at birth, we have 65 years in Congo, while we have almost 20 years more in Norway. So many examples of how the inequality in the world would make it harder and more difficulty for the populations of the poor and developing countries to reach the same equality for breaking this cycle. So our dilemma is how to break the cycle and provide equal opportunities for everyone. My colleague Lais will introduce to you the alternatives that we have come up with.
Thank you, Larissa. So to solve this problem, we have thought about a few alternatives. The first one is money donation, which we think would be great on feasibility and also in reach, but the results wouldn't be that great because this would be palliative and would leave the countries involved like always dependent on donations. The second one is tax reform. It would achieve great results and easy reach, but we do think the feasibility would be hard because rich people would probably take out their money from their country and invest on fiscal paradise, such as Panama, for example. The third one is a multidisciplinary approach, and which is the one that we have chosen. How are we going to do this? First of all, we decided that different countries need different alternatives. So we decided to divide them on countries with starvation and or civil war, and developing countries and developed countries. About the countries with starvation and or civil war, we decided we recommend that the United Nations help in partnership with rich countries to work on infrastructure and hunger fight. And they can help, for example, with shelter for refugees and donations. We don't think this alternative would make a great impact because it seems palliative and focus on short term, and we want to develop an environment so these countries can walk along. About the awareness, about the awareness, we can count on world leaders, meetings, and press coverage. The second group, which is developing countries, we think the big techs, and very important, their leaders together should be the ones helping this part. What they're gonna do, those big techs will transfer for education and health with free internet access, equipment and hardware donations, and also softwares. This is for short terms and mid-terms, and the awareness would be by social media engagement. So we would use the social media to make this go further. The third one is about developing countries. We would use the policymakers to think about public programs for undeveloped regions. So the government probably already knows which part of the country needs those programs. So they're gonna talk with B2B to attract local investments in education and health, and also work with tax incentives. This is thinking about the mid and long term.
Now, going for the recommendations, we have the three alternatives that my colleague Lais has already mentioned. And here, for the sake of this competition, we have made some estimates regarding the total of population on each of the alternatives and their GPD. So we estimate that 10% of the world population is located in the countries that are extremely poor or have a civil war. We estimate 75% of them in the developing countries and 15% in the developed countries. So thank you. So for that reason, we're gonna go with the highest impact approach, which is the developing countries. Now, why we are choosing this, of course, because of the impact on the largest number of population, and also because those countries are under development, they already have high rates of engagement with social media, and we can use that to leverage our program. And last, because we understand that this is going to be a smoother implementation, because we don't want to create anything from scratch. We want to use the programs that we already have, but just bring a more global approach to them. So how are we going to do that? The big techs will be the main sponsors of this program, and they will have to partner with schools. They're going to also use data and technology that they have to build and improve the services that they can provide to the society. We're going to bring a more global approach and not country by country or region by region. So the differential of this suggestion is to actually build this global organized program, and last, use the social media to empower the society, because we have seen the power that social media have when society wants to mobilize, for example, Black Lives Matters movement or Me Too movement. We can use that in favor to the society so that we can bring awareness to the cause. We have divided the solutions into short-term and long-term. In the short-term, basically in the most elementary schooling, because we understand that that is the foundation of the society. So we transform those schools into internet hubs so that the students there can have access to all the good quality programs of education that we have already built in the world. So just providing them internet and hardware, it will already level the teaching level that we have in those schools. We're also going to use the social media as the source of data, and of course to bring ownership to the population, to the final users, and to promote contests such as math contests, spelling contests that we can do to incentive those students. And the big techs, of course, they will be the providers of internet, educational services, and provide hardware as needed. In the long term, we're going to focus as those kids grow, we're going to have to grow with them. So we need to change our investments from the elementary to the high level education and technical education to actually give skills to them to be into the business market. And regarding health, we're going to use all of those data that we have built and we'll use the machine learning to build softwares that can help people's life. Regarding social media, again, it's all about empowering the users, and the big tech will continue to provide services and hardware and use the data that we have gathered in those programs to improve the programs that they already have. And as a conclusion, we understand our group here, we understand that the education is the solution for social ascension. We don't think that, we don't see a problem in wealth distribution. We see a problem in people don't having the same opportunity all over the world. So, and we believe so that everyone can have the same opportunity, education is the way. And the developed countries are the ones with the biggest population. So that has to be our focus. And our goal here is to bring strength and bring awareness through social media to provide skills to those populations that are underrepresented so they can break the wealth wheel. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next steps of this competition.